Same thing with all this calorie stuff and not fasting and all this stuff. Fasting got a bad rap for a while, and it's like, why? It's been used for thousands of years.
Yeah.
At least 2021 years, for example, because we find it in all the major religions. It's like, if there's something wrong with fasting, don't you think we'd have found out 2,000
Yeah,
years ago?
we would have learned.
Not like fasting is okay for 2,000 years, but hey, all of a sudden in 2021, it's bad for you. What?
You just have to do it safely, and it actually is something that may have made people not do it because they didn't understand how to do it. But I actually am curious for you, because you have a great team that's doing a great job reversing diabetes fairly quickly with intermittent fasting and other types of fasting. So I'm curious, if I was a patient who met you and I wanted to take this approach, what's the process for you to treat your patients? What do you surround them with so that they can be successful taking on this intermittent fasting approach?
I think the most important thing, there's several. One is education. So getting the right information. So podcasts like this are a great way to get exposed to the ideas. I've produced a lot of YouTube videos talking about fasting. So it's short, sort of 10-minute videos on all different aspects of fasting, benefits, how to do it, different types of fasting, what problems can crop up. So that's one thing, is getting the right information. Second is making sure that your sort of team is on board, that is your physician and so on. And that's a lot easier to do now than it was sort of when I started in 7, 8 years ago, when everybody thought I was complete
Yeah,
nuts, right?
yeah,
Remember this, 2013, 2014, right? Everybody thought fasting was just the worst thing you could
right.
possibly do to your body. So getting the right physician, because again, it is important. And our number one rule is always be safe. So make sure that there is somebody monitoring you, somebody you can talk to that you can trust, who knows about fasting, but also can adjust your medications if you are on medications. The third is to make sure that you have sort of support, like community that is supportive. There's nothing harder to do than doing it on your own. And that's true for anything, actually. So making sure that you get the right support. And those are the main sort of pillars. So the information you can get, there's books, there's podcasts, there's YouTube videos, there's all kinds of information that you can get. Professional help, like so at the fasting method, there are coaches that you can get, there's physicians that can help you. And then the right community, which is you can find on, say, so we have an online community at the fastingmethod.com, but there's
Yeah,
also the free Facebook groups, and there's all these groups that talk about fasting online. So there's lots out there for support right now. And just remember that fasting is really any period of time that you're not eating. So we're not talking about jumping from sort of 6 meals a day to not eating for 40 days and 40 nights. Like, you can just take it slowly. Like, instead of 6 meals, cut it down to 3 meals a day. Now, this is how we ate in the 70s: breakfast, lunch, dinner, no snacks. Then when you're comfortable with that, you can slowly cut down your eating window until you get something that's starting to make a difference. And you can measure it with your blood sugars. For example, you can get a continuous blood glucose monitor. You can check your blood sugars, or if it's your weight, you can measure your weight or your waist size. And then you can slowly, gradually build up to the point that you're comfortable.
cool. Let's look at a couple of myths that people have about intermittent fasting, because as you said, the information is really critical. And I'm so happy that your team has created a lot of resources to help people, because I found that coaching is so important, and then the patients end up coaching each other, when they have a group to do it with. So I really appreciate that. So let's knock out a couple of those. So the first is that intermittent fasting leads to muscle loss. What would you say about that?
That's one of these persistent myths. And one of the things you have to understand is that that's not really what happens to muscle. So we know how muscle develops and how it shrinks. You grow muscle when you exercise it. And when you don't exercise it, like when you go to complete bed rest, for example, which happens, within the hospital and so on, you lose muscle extremely quickly. So it has very little to do with what you eat and what you don't eat. Muscle grows when you put stress on it, and muscle shrinks when you take the stress off of it. That's why you send an astronaut in peak physical condition into space, no gravity,
Right.
muscle starts going downhill immediately, right? Immediately. So within days of zero gravity, actually within a day of zero gravity. So what do? Of course, they exercise. They put stress
Right.
on the muscles. So that's how you grow muscle. That's how you shrink muscle. Very little to do with what you eat. If you could simply grow muscle by eating protein,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we'd have a lot of Arnold Schwarzeneggers in this country. We probably have like 50% of the population looking like that. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So you have to get it out of your head that what you eat affects muscle growth. It only does at the extremes. That is, if you are extremely protein deficient, then yes, you are not going to grow your muscle. Yes, you do need protein. So the recommended daily amount of protein is 0.8 grams per kilogram per day. Most people in North America are eating somewhere around 1.3, 1.2, so 50, 60% more protein daily than is actually necessary. And we've been doing that for, 40 or 50 years. So it's not like we're protein deficient in this country. So, a few days of not eating protein are unlikely to cause much muscle loss. A lot of these studies, and again, the other thing is that if you think about it, our body stores excess food energy in the form of sugar and in the form of body fat. If you are going to need it, then your body is going to take that energy from sugar and from body fat. Very little comes from protein. As in, if you have to believe that our body is so stupid that we store energy as fat, but the minute you need it, you start using muscle.
Right.
Like, why would your body do that? Right? It's like saving up firewood for the winter, and the minute it gets cold, you chop up your sofa and throw it
Right.
in the fire. Why would your body be so stupid? Like, do we believe that Mother Nature is so stupid? And we actually survived to become the dominant species of this planet
That's
by
right.
being so stupid? Like, do you really think that? And so the whole thing is dumb. If you look at people who are overweight, because of course that's the main reason people are fasting, it's estimated they have something like 40 to 50% more protein than a lean person. And that's not muscle necessarily. A lot of it is connective tissue, skin, connective tissue, blood vessels. That's all protein. That all needs to go.
Right.
And what's interesting, and we have no data on this, of course, just anecdotes, but we've treated a lot of people for weight loss. Some people have done extremely well. And we've never sent a single person for skin removal surgery. And we think the reason is because the body actually catabolizes some of that protein
Mm-hmm.
for energy. And that's not a
Mm.
bad thing, it's a good thing. And this is the whole idea of autophagy, is that it's a breakdown of these sort of molecules, subcellular structures, and it's not a bad thing, because the first step in rejuvenation is actually to get rid of this old stuff so
Right.
that you can replace it. The body does something very similar. If you have no protein, such as when you're fasting, your body does use protein, and it's going to take protein from everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's only going to regrow those protein where the stresses are. So if
Mm.
you are exercising, your body says, hey, I need those muscles. I'm going to rebuild those muscles. Same thing, you go in space, your body breaks down muscle, says, actually, I don't need it. Or the skin.
Mm.
There's a continuous, turning over of cells in our body. Skin cells is one of the most common. So when your body turns over those skin cells and it says, hey, I don't need those skin cells, it's going to burn it for energy. If you never fast, then why would your body burn anything for energy? It's is trying to store energy, not burn it. So we actually haven't had as many problems with excess skin in people with large weight loss compared to others. And that's just anecdotally. I can only tell you anecdotally.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. I've certainly seen people, have skin tags falling off and all kinds of cool stuff that we weren't really thinking about. And then all of a sudden, like, Doc, I've noticed this is happening. So it's kind of like the good side effect of this work. And I find that people do pretty well with fasting. And but they do have these other misconceptions. Doc, I'm always going to be hungry. Doc, is going to slow my metabolism. So what's your thoughts on those two concepts, hunger and metabolism?
Yeah, those are probably the two other main concerns. So one is hunger, and yes, you are going to get hungry during fasting. That's just natural. But on the flip side, you have to understand that the hunger does not continue to build, and this is what people are always worried about. That the hunger is just going to keep going, keep going, keep going until it's intolerable. That's not actually what happens when you look at studies of fasting. You see that hunger does build. So it tends to peak at three times: breakfast, lunch, and dinner time
Hmm.
in general. So there's a learned response to that. And when they study what happens to your hunger levels when you miss a meal, so say you skip lunch, like I'm skipping lunch today, what happens at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, you're hungry, then it crests, and then it falls. By 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, your hunger level is actually no different than if you ate. And that's really interesting because what your body has done, of course, is taken the calories that it needs. So instead of taking your lunch energy or calories, you take that calories out of your stores, which is glucose and body fat. So if you're diabetic, hey, great. You've taken those 400 or 500 calories from your blood glucose and used it up. Or you've taken 400 or 500 calories from your body fat and used it up.
Yeah.
That's great. If you're trying to reduce your blood sugars, if you're trying to lose weight, that's great. So the hunger is going to be, it's a real issue. So there's ways to deal with it. But you have to understand that if you ignore it, it will actually just go away.
Hmm.
The thing about the metabolic rate, again, complete fabrication from most people, because again, you have to understand a little bit of physiology of what happens during fasting. So we know, and we've known for 50 years, that when you don't eat, insulin falls and your counter-regulatory hormones go up. Counter-regulatory hormones, and this is basic sort of first year medical school stuff. Counter-regulatory hormones includes activation of the sympathetic nervous system, including things like noradrenaline. So essentially, your body is not shutting down at all. It's actually increasing things like growth hormone and noradrenaline and cortisol, and it's actually stimulating and activating your body. That's why you have more energy when you fast, because you're liberating the pathways to your body fat. You can't burn body fat when your insulin's high. When you're eating, you have no access to burn body fat. You've completely shut them off, right? Insulin inhibits lipolysis. You cannot burn body fat when your insulin levels are through the roof. When your insulin levels fall, that's when you can use those fat stores. And you're not going to feel tired because you're pumping up the sympathetic nervous system. That's a fight or flight response. So your metabolic rate doesn't fall. In fact, one study which looked at 4 days of fasting, so they measured VO2 and they measured energy expenditure, and they found that if you measure compared to day zero, 4 days of not eating, you're burning actually 10% more calories per day than when you were eating,
Mm,
and your VO2 went up 10%, which means that your body is metabolically
that's right.
more active.
That's
And
right.
it's because of these counter regulatory hormones. That's the entire idea. And it's a protective mechanism. If you think about it, if you're a caveman or cavewoman and there's no food, if your body starts to shut down, you're going to die because today you're not eating. So tomorrow you have no energy to go out and hunt or forage. And the next day is even worse, the next day even worse. You can see how that's a big downward spiral. And we would have all died
That's
in
right.
those
That's
caves.
right. That's right.
So our bodies are simply not that stupid. What we do is we don't turn down our body rate, we switch fuels to our stores. We switch to body fat. We say, okay, I'm going to open up the stores of body fat and I'm going to pump you full of energy so that you can go out and hunt and find some food. So it's a survival mechanism, right? And that's the whole point. In the modern world, of course, we're not facing that situation, but what you have to know is that, yes, the studies show that there's less problems with a decreased metabolic rate compared to chronic calorie restriction, for example.